Hey guys, Reels back with another video, and welcome to what I'm going to probably be calling Manga of the Week, the planning to be weekly series where I talk about the manga chapters of One Piece, DanDaDan, and Chainsaw Man that have come out during that week. And today, there's no DanDaDan, so I'll tell you if you're here for DanDaDan, don't expect anything. However, there is Chainsaw Man and One Piece. Let's get into it. So let's start off this video with One Piece, chapter 1170. The chapter primarily covers the fight between Ragnir, the Hammer, and Loki, the Prince of Elbaf. So we see Ragnir being thrown around at Loki. We see a couple moments here and there that are interesting. Mainly that this hammer is sentient, as shown in the previous chapter last year. As Skapergaban and Shanks are holding off King Harold, King Harold drops the lore bomb that the devil fruit has not been eaten at all in centuries and has been laid dormant because the hammer hasn't found somebody worthy yet. Some more fighting occurs between Gaban and Shanks and Harold, which we actually see a small detail through all of this is that Shanks is primarily using his left hand, which for any of you guys who are caught up to this point in One Piece will know that he doesn't have anymore because that is where he got his Shallow's Covenant mark on, which he then let the Lord of the Coast, nearby Luffy's home village, eat, so that way he wouldn't be connected to Emu. But I guess that also leads to the theory that people have been theorizing that Shanks was left-handed, and that's why Mihawk doesn't want to fight him because he's not in his best performing state. Skapergaban gives us the lore drop that if you infuse Conqueror's Haki into your blade or into your weapon of choice and smack the people under the Abyss Covenants hard enough, if you hit them hard enough with Conqueror's Haki, it will work. Which actually can help us in the modern day because we are fighting Domi Reversi and we are fighting Holy Knights and we are fighting Emu. So we at least got the Holy Knights down. The Domi Reversi still might be stopped by the two Sun God Nika pieces playing the Reversi. But for what we know now, the Holy Knights, their problem is solved. We can deal with those guys. Shanks asks a pretty good question to Skapergaban and says, well, how do you know that? Like, how did you know that? And Gaban gives the reveal that throughout the journey of Gold Roger, after the God Valley incident, after they get baby Shanks, they have been bombarded by these boats filled with Holy Knights. Not really filled, but having Holy Knights on them, looking for a red-haired baby named Shanks, which is most likely how the Roger Pirates knew Shanks' name. And that is important because not only does it show how Skapergaban knows their weakness, but also is hinted via the dialogue that Shanks says shortly after, that Shepard Summers, the main Holy Knight on Elbaf right now, was in some of those ships and has gotten trauma because of Skapergaban, which we saw. But as Shanks and Skapergaban hold off Harold being affected by the Abyss, we see Loki and Ragnir continue their fight. Loki attacks a lot with his hammer against the other hammer and goes like hammer to each other, shattering his to nothing and sending Ragnir flying backwards. And it is then revealed officially that Ragnir is an item infused with the devil fruit. More likely than not, because if it was an animal infused with a weapon fruit, then it would probably have been dead by now. And it's implied it's been around for centuries, so that makes more sense. Also, I like the idea of weapons infused with devil fruits, which actually brings up an interesting point, because Vegapunk supposedly reinvented or discovered the way to infuse Zoan devil fruit spirits into objects. However, this appears to be centuries old, and no offense to you, Vegapunk, I don't think you're that old. I guess it makes sense because it's said that Vegapunk has all the knowledge that the Void Century ancient civilization was at. So maybe they figured out how to do it. They infused Ragnir with the devil fruit, and we have it protecting the Elbaf devil fruit. Speaking of the hammered devil fruit, it is a squirrel, implied to be just a normal squirrel because it's a very direct reference to Ratatoskr in Norse mythology. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, by the way. It's a reference to Ratatoskr, the chipmunk-esque squirrel with horns that climbs up and down the world tree Yggdrasil. And it's almost a direct reference. I don't know why it wouldn't be, because it's Loki, it's the Norse mythology island of Elbaf. We're going to be seeing that reference. I saw people theorizing that Loki was going to have a Ratatoskr mythical Zoan, which I really liked that idea. I thought that was going to be fun, and then he was going to shrink down and be on the crew in like a squirrel form. I thought that was very, very fun. But instead, we get this little hammer with a squirrel power, which I do like, and explains why it was being all jumpy before, as in its hammer form. And we see it get like a little boo-boo on its head because Loki hit it hard enough straight to the dome, and which then makes Ragnir accept Loki as the next candidate to eat the mythical devil fruit. Actually, we don't know if it's mythical, but it's implied that it is a mythical Zoan. We know it's a Zoan, but it's not a mythical Zoan yet. Also, a small thing I noticed while reading the chapter was there was a moment where Harold used Conqueror's Haki, and that caught Gaban off guard, because Gaban didn't realize that somebody with the Abyss could have Conqueror's Haki, which brings up an interesting implication, because while we do know Conqueror's Haki is the opposite of the Abyss, it either confirms all the Holy Knights have no Conqueror's Haki, which I kind of doubt, because I feel like Garling might have some, but maybe Gaban just never fought Garling, and we don't know that. Or maybe just in general, Gaban has never seen somebody with these powers use Conqueror's Haki. So maybe, something interesting, random theory, what if the moment that Shanks lost his arm, the moment that he got his arm cut off because of the Lord of the Coast, previously mentioned, that's when he first used Conqueror's Haki, which we see. We see that during Luffy's backstory. So maybe that was where Shanks was unlocking his Conqueror's Haki, but he had to play it cool, of course, because it's Shanks. Then we get a small sequence of Ragnir letting Loki over to the chest with the devil fruit, and we see it like, it looks very small in his hands, but he's also like Or's size, so it's relatively still kind of big. From what I would see, it'd be the size of like a pumpkin for us, which is not too unreasonable, but for him it's still kind of small. But the point is he eats it, he makes the grossed out face because it's a devil fruit and they taste like durians, and we see a whole sequence of Loki fighting Harold. And in the sequence, we see a very interesting silhouette of Harold being held by this large, slender beast, which everyone is theorizing it to be Nidhogg, the serpentine creature in Norse mythology that is chained to the bottom of Yggdrasil and is let out during Ragnarok. Also, I may be getting things completely wrong, just as an FYI. I'm going off of my knowledge and what I've seen other people theorize. Just for the record. I like the idea of Nidhogg because we have seen it technically via the Kid Nightmares that are also happening on Elbaf. I keep forgetting that happens on Elbaf. But we do see it technically. However, we can't know for sure if that's the true form because we also then see Loki in those nightmares and we know that that's not what Loki looks like. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see until Oda has this big reveal of Loki's Devil Fruit and it's like true powers and everything, and we get the full page of it because Oda's not going to reveal it in the flashback, of course. And then, near the end of the fight, first of all, Loki transforms back so we don't get the spoilers, but then we get a very, very emotional scene where the castle's already in flames, a lot of the guards are dead, trying to protect Harold from leaving, and Loki manages to blast off the abyss off of Harold's arm, temporarily. It will regen, but it blasts it off to give him a moment of lucidity. And Harold then points out that the Mark of the Abyss is starting to affect his mind and cause him to believe himself to actually be a god, which maybe that's why all the Holy Knights we've seen, minus Gunko, have shown very narcissistic personalities. And Loki, for good reason, is like, why do you want me to kill you, father? I know I'm gonna have to, but like, why? And we get this shot of Loki swinging Ragnir, striking down lightning and Conqueror's Haki directly into Harold. And we see a very brief flashback at the bottom, seeing that one of Loki's first memories was of his father. And we see many other shots of the people of Elbaf being in their better state because King Harold did good for the kingdom, but then eventually succumbed to the evil of the world government. I think the entire chapter is very, very good. I'm excited to see what I'm assuming is one of the last two chapters of the flashback, which my current theory is we will see the Lola proposal. Because I've been waiting for it this entire flashback, and it feels like that we've been waiting for this Loki-Lola proposal ever since Whole Cake when she mentioned it. However, for One Piece, we will have to be waiting 2 more weeks for that. So in next week's episode of Manga of the Week, there won't be One Piece, unfortunately. But there will be Chainsaw Man. This series got a new chapter this week as well, chapter 225. This chapter resumes only maybe like a little bit or around the same time that the last chapter ended off. We see that many things around the world are now missing legs because Denji in the last chapter, Denji Man, Chainsaw, I'm going to call him Denji Man. Denji Man ate legs. We see pigs in a pen with no legs. We see people on crosswalks missing legs and just kind of crawling around. And we see okay, sorry if audio cut out at any point. My microphone died between the last clip and this one, so if I sound different, that's why. But Yoru crawls across the ground, climbs over the ledge, as we see a montage of her jumping down, and Denji keeps eating things and erasing them, and she sees a motorcycle. But as she does so, Denji erases teeth, which now causes everyone to talk like this, and that's why the dialogue's gonna be all weird. To translate that, that's why the dialogue all sounds like that. And the dialogue written will be weird. However, Yoru still manages to make herself the chainsaw motorcycle, which was from one of my favorite arcs, Falling Devil arc. I'm very happy to see the motorcycle show back up again because, again, I loved the Falling Devil arc when I was reading through it. And all except for that one moment where Denji says that he just wants to have sex, other than that, that arc is one of my favorites. Very close to Gun Devil, very close to the Gun Devil arc, which is my personal favorite snowball fight to all of you manga readers. And Yoru activates this chainsaw motorcycle. However, she doesn't have legs, so it just kind of goes flying, sending Chainsaw into a wall, who also now doesn't have teeth, so it's very difficult to keep the creatures he's eaten in. So one falls out, we don't see what it is or what it unerases. And Yoru continues crawling on the ground, looking for... Well, she finds Denji, but she gets into Denji. She starts reaching into his open mouth now, forcing him to eventually then vomit back up legs and teeth, which she specifically then calls out. However, in almost an instant after she says that, Denji kicks her straight into a wall, and Yoru starts questioning if the devils Denji had on his armor were in that vomit. And Denji is like, well, did I eat them? Well, I know I ate them, but were they in that vomit? And that catches Yoru off guard, because now she's like, well, there goes more of my friends. They both see farther in the area a pile of the little capsules that Death gave Denji, and Denji Man starts running towards it, booking it. As Yoru shoots it, sends them flying. She manages to grab one, but she looks back, and Denji Man has already booked it. He is gone. He's doing his smart strat of being a bit cowardly. Yoru starts getting pissed that he's running away again. Starts being like, I have one of your little capsules. Come and get me now. However, Denji reveals that none of these capsules were filling him up enough. The equivalent of eating like a Tic Tac when you're like starving. So to Denji, now since earlier War Devil opened up the doors to hell, his plan is to go through those and find real devils and eat those. And Yoru chases along after him. And the chapter ends with Denji Man and Yoru both staring off into what looks to be a darkness area. We see like what appears to be a stony, earthy texture fading into some darkness in the background, similar to what we saw with the astronauts and Darkness Devil back in International Assassins. And they're in like a little, like what looks like a little alcove of the hell doors. Maybe it's more of like a patio alcove, if you will. But they're out looking to some darkness with an earthy texture. Now, what this could mean, I like the theory that is just Darkness Devil out there. That darkness is looming over there, and we're gonna have to fight darkness again. However, because Denji has fought him before, and now has the power to, erase things just by eating them in his control, we might see the erasure of darkness. Maybe I'm just throwing curveball. I'm just throwing whatever. It's Chainsaw Man, okay? This isn't One Piece. We can't be theorizing and have it make sense, okay? Like, earlier when we were talking about, like, the Loki proposal stuff, throw all that out the window. What we are worrying about right now is quite literally anything could happen. People are saying that it is darkness, and I like that idea. I'm supporting the idea that Darkness Devil is right over there, and that's what they're both looking at. However, it's Fujimoto we're talking about. The guy who tried to levitate. The guy who, role-played as his sister on Twitter. The guy who recently, when watching the Reize movie, complained that the author is a monster for not letting them meet. So all in all, this chapter was crazy. I still can't believe it actually happened. I like the whole ending. I like the removal of teeth and them crawling around. It felt very like desperate of a fight, very like pathetic. I don't know how to explain it. And luckily for Chainsaw Man, he will be showing up in next week's edition of Manga of the Week, because there is no break next week for Chainsaw Man. And we will be seeing the return of DanDaDan, which its next chapter will be next Monday. So thank you all for sticking around with me for this episode of Manga of the Week. If you are new here and you like it, like, subscribe, and comment about what you think is going to happen in the Loki flashback. Are we going to see the Lola proposal? Is it just going to end and we're going to cut back to Loki and Harden with the rest of the crew? What do you think is going to happen in One Piece? Or who do you think is out in the darkness in Chainsaw Man in Hell? Because, again, I think it's Darkness Devil, but it's Fujimoto we're talking about. It could be anybody. Hell, maybe even Nayuta shows up again. Any Nayuta Copers still alive? So, do all the classic YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the future.